Hi everyone, welcome to another session. Let's just understand a little bit of requirements for it. Again, as I said, this training they are still for free. It gives you guys a good background on PCI DSS. But by the time we start going to like hands-on at the actual control and all those things, then it's gonna be solely paid on our website. So if you want to complete it, then you can definitely pay it and then complete the training and also have a GLC tool that you can practice in real life, right? First, requirement 12.8, it ensure customer effectively manage third-party service providers that handles or have access to cardholder data. Customer responsibility, oversee that your third-party vendor risks or oversee their relationship and monitor their PCI DSS compliance status. Do you see? Monitor. So third-party vendor risk analysis is not just all about it's not all about onboarding vendors. You have to monitor. And that's why I will still insist and tell you guys that this is one of the reasons we will always give job, because continuous monitoring common. We have to keep doing that over and over and over again. Okay. And if you see key scenario for using this, for example, a customer may use a third-party service provider for various functions within or related to their card data environment. The third-party service provider access to customer card data environment. First, I'll just say like third-party vendors might directly access cardholder data for storage, processing, or transmission, some of the things I've covered. Or they might even be responsible for managing their servers, networks, or other systems that are also part of the cardholder data environment. Still, how is this impacting security? Of course, the third-party vendors could impact the security of the cardholder data through system of services. Just having access to that, of course, you definitely impact the security, right? But what is the customer supposed to do? And that, again, these are things that we're going to discuss in depth when we go to the third-party vendor risks. We start talking about due diligence, ensure that your vendors actually follow best practices and also be in compliance with PCI DSS, as well as having a very established and clear agreement or policy that simply outlines the roles, responsibility, as well as security expectation. And not to forget the fact that we have to continuous monitoring, CANMON, monitor that vendor DUC standard annually. That's why even if their thing, everything is 100% works, looks so good this year, we have to do the CANMON to make sure they stay in compliance, right? Although third party doesn't have to be PCI DSS compliant for the customer to meet requirement 12.8, they must also comply with all agreed upon controls as well as security best practices. And then say a customer outsources data storage to a third-party provider that have access to their card data environment. What is your own responsibility? The customer must monitor the third party for PCI DSS compliance statute annually. They'll definitely have to perform their due diligence to ensure that controls are being implemented and enough share being able to protect your valuable trust, that's your customer data. And you also need to include clauses in your contract that ensure security and compliance standards are met. But what happens in a situation where the security and compliance standards are met? What are you going to do? That's a question that, or an answer that I want you all to tell me. What are you going to do? Put it in the comment section and I'll be more than happy to read those. Okay. A customer uses a third-party vendor to manage network systems that are also within the system. But what would the customer do at this point? First, the customer wants to ensure that the third-party vendors perform annual assessment and maintain compliance with relevant PCI DSS requirement, have agreement in place specifying the required security measures as well as monitoring processes, provide cloud-based services that store and process cardholder data, impacting the security of the data, and then monitor the security of the cloud environment and ensure that the third-party service provider adhere to the necessary PCI DSS controls. And also you have to review and validate the third-party service provider compliance documentation at least once a year. So that's something that once you onboard them, you still have to like do your CANMON, okay? Go back and review it and, making sure that they stay in compliance and their controls are operational, right? Also, but step to comply with requirement 12.8, first have to perform due diligence. It means that you, the client, you have to research third-party service provider and evaluate their availability to meet the PCI DSS standards. And this is some of the things that we covered previously. Then the next one is to be able to come up with a contract and agreement where you clearly define security responsibility, including compliance monitoring. And then you go to annual monitoring, where you review and monitor third-party service provider compliance status at least once a year. And then you go through the verification, where you ensure that third-party service provider provide compliance evidence, such as assessment certifications, right? So there was a takeaway on this. Customer must actively manage third-party service provider relationship and ensure their security practices align with PCI DSS requirements. Regularly monitor and perform due diligence are very, very essential to make sure that compliance aspect has been maintained and also cardholder data are being protected. But the third-party service provider do not need to be, again, as we all know, PCI DSS compliant for this to meet the requirement 12.8, but still the customer will want to verify their compliance status and make sure that they implement best security practices. And this is exactly all the things that we'll discuss with customer just performing their due diligence, right? Also, let's say you have service impacting compliance, but when a third-party service provider provides a service such as network security management or database or data storage that impact the PCI DSS compliance, those services are default considered in scope for your customer PCI DSS assessment. And with that, the customer must also ensure that the third-party vendors meet the applicable PCI DSS requirement for their services or for those services. The customer needs to hire a third-party service provider that will manage their network security controls, such as firewall, in relation to requirement 1, as we have discussed. But what's the impact? This third party must also demonstrate that it meets the applicable PCI DSS requirement 1 for network security. If the third-party service provider cannot provide evidence of compliance, the customer cannot consider those requirements in their assessment as well. So a third-party service provider store encrypted backups of cardholder data for a customer. What will be the impact? First, the third-party service provider must meet specific PCI DSS requirement related to access control as requirement 7, physical security requirement 9, and others. So if the third-party vendor provider does not meet the requirements, then the customer cannot include those controls in the PCI DSS assessment as well. And that literally covers all what we've been discussing. But let's look at some of the key customer responsibility. First, these are things I will discuss. You want to monitor your third-party vendor provider to make sure that they are in compliance with PCI DSS. In a nutshell, they are protecting customer data. Perform due diligence, go through all the different stuff that we'll talk, perform your due diligence, make sure they answer all the questions that you might have, go through all the different reports to make sure that they are actually adhering to the PCI DSS requirements or standards. And then you have compliance documentation, where you ensure that, of course, it's not all about ticking the box, but actually testing, getting those artifacts, actual artifact report certification to be able to validate their efficiency or to make sure that they are able to protect your cardholder data. You also have proof of compliance, where, of course, they have to provide evidence that they meet PCI DSS requirement for services that they provide. But customer accountability, even though third-party service provider provides services, you also have responsibility. You will remain responsible for PCI DSS compliance and must validate the third-party service provider to ensure that they meet the necessary standards. And that brings us to the end of that. And then we are moving now to the next one, which talk of third-party service provider services and customer PCI DSS compliance. No, I think this is just a light slide that covers that. Takeaway slide. Third-party service provider provides service impacting cardholder data must comply with PCI DSS requirements. A customer is responsible for verifying third-party service provider compliance and including the services in their own PCI DSS assessment. Proof of compliance for third-party service providers is necessary to ensure the customer meets all relevant PCI DSS requirements. Right, and then the next one, we will go through requirement 12.2.2, requirement 12.9.2, supporting customer requests, and see what it is. And that's already control that we are assessing, right? But now we kind of now start going, granular and understanding what it is, what are we going to be doing. I will see that shortly in future videos.